Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Boulder, Colorado in the US by Kate Kripke. Thank you so much, Kate, for taking the time and for connecting once more with me. Before we get into all of the beautiful conversation that we're going to embark on, I would love it if you can share for everyone listening and watching a little about you and your journey so far in this life.
My journey in this life. Where do you begin with that? So I love the question, actually, because it really does feel to me like every single day is part of that journey of life. But I guess a quick summary is that I was raised by two very hardworking perfectionists in New York City. During my early years, I struggled with a ton of anxiety, panic attacks, need to be perfect, that sort of type A. I don't know if little children could be diagnosed as type A, but I think I probably would have been diagnosed as type A as a young girl. Throughout my lifetime, I did a number of different things to try to manage that anxiety, which we may get into at some point, but everything from therapy to medication to yoga to, trying to organize my life just so that I would feel better. And I ended up becoming a mom in my early 30s, have two now teenage daughters, but struggled with a ton of anxiety in early motherhood. And I've really devoted my career to supporting women in early motherhood to really find new ways to connect deeply with their children, to access that type of motherhood that most people would say they want, while also pursuing things outside of motherhood that are really important to them. And I think the way to go about that is very different than many high-performing, high-achieving women like myself think when they come into motherhood. But it's been a really fascinating experience to be doing this work right alongside with my clients. I've really had a daily commitment to this work for the last 20 years, mostly turning it up a notch in the last 10 or so years where I've seen the most difference. And so I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I am a deep advocate for maternal and child mental health and fulfillment in motherhood. And I think there are ways to do that are outside the mainstream that are really, really helpful for people.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing a bit of your journey. I always find it, fascinating to hear everyone's journeys because we're all so different, yet so many things are, common. And it's I think that what it actually allows us to connect more deeply with another person when we can know a little bit more about their journey or what they've been through. And, I have a lot of people in my life as well that are dealing with motherhood anxiety and a lot of these things. So I'm really looking forward now to exploring a little bit more around this. But I wanted to get your take first on, in your experience, and perhaps both your personal experience and your clients that you've been working with all of these years. What are some of the most common challenges that you find of why people if they are following more of the mainstream trends or mainstream ways, they aren't able to actually find a good state for their well-being?
Yeah, It's such a great question. I think many women enter motherhood doing a lot of thinking and researching about what it looks like or what's required to be a good mom. I mean, I've never, ever met a mother who doesn't want to be a good mother. And yet, even the question comes with fear of being a bad mother. So many of us enter this journey of motherhood already trying to prevent disaster and afraid we're going to create disaster. And I think that's because many of us enter parenthood with our own, I might use the word traumatic, but I don't necessarily mean big T trauma. Sometimes there's relational challenges, or we were mothered in a way that we're like, there's no way I want to be my own mother in motherhood. And then some of us are so intellectual and analytical that we read books, or we look at social media, or we watch people doing certain things that we think are required to do to be a good mother. And when we focus on fear of disaster, the catastrophic thinking, or the doing, we actually miss the point, which is, how do we want to feel in motherhood? No one asks that question. No one asks the question, how do I want to feel as a mother? We ask, what do I need to do to be a good mom? And I just think that statement in and of itself is a setup.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because I feel a lot of times that when mothers are working with me, that a lot of times they're always asking me about, give me the tips, give me what, like,
That's
what
right.
are the things to do, as you're saying, instead of, how do I connect more? How do I want to experience this? How do I want to feel? How do I want to relate to my child, to my partner, to whoever else is part of their life? And a lot of times I think that my experience with that is I keep on telling them, well, it doesn't matter really the how to, as much as the how are you and how are you working with yourself to be the person that you want to be, to then show up for your child in that way. And I think that is
Exactly.
different. Yeah.
It's really different. And many people aren't hardwired to think that way, right? Because we think, but okay, if I know what to do, then I can just do it. And mothering, parenting in general, but my clients are all mothers and I'm a mother. Motherhood is all about the connection. It doesn't matter what we do. It does not matter whether you breastfeed or bottle feed. It does not matter if you co-sleep or have your child sleep in their own bed. It does not matter. All these things that we think matters so much around the doing really doesn't matter, because there's not one right or one wrong way to raise a child. And if we're unavailable for those relationship moments, the real connecting moments, which, by the way, often happen in non-joyful situations in motherhood because there's so much chaos. But if we're so busy trying to figure out what to do, we miss those opportunities for true connection. And I've been there. I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in trying to do it right. And we miss the point of relationship building.
And as well, and this is something that I work a lot with my clients, is about understanding, you want to do this and you know how to do it in your own way. As you're saying, there's no right way, but it's like, okay, I chose this way.
Yes.
If in the moment when you are potentially sleep deprived, when there's so much on your plate, if in the moment you aren't able to be fully present with what's happening and you're just triggered, because that's what happens to all of us, things trigger us because we have buttons that are being pushed. In the moment, you're not able
Especially
to
if we're sleep deprived, right? Yeah.
I know. So it's like, how do you think that you're going to be able to respond in the moment appropriately with the new knowledge if we don't do that? We just react. And it's hard to do that. And as you're saying, sleep deprivation, that's a huge thing as well.
Yeah. And not only that, Ryan, but I think we can actually do all the right things in those moments. Maybe we've listened to a podcast, or we've read a book, or we've talked to our pediatrician, and, or a parenting, disciplined person. And we're like, oh, I actually know what to do. But we can be doing all the quote unquote right things. But if we're doing them from a place of agitation or nervous system activation, where we are in that fight or flight state, it doesn't, that the doing won't matter, because maternal and child mental health are so deeply interconnected that our child is going to feed off of the energy behind the doing. And I actually think this is this goes, of course, for any relationship, but I think it's really interesting to look at that mother, baby, infant, even as their kids get older, but especially when our kids are little, we are communicating through not just our words, but our facial expressions, which are often so subtle, through our body tension, through our tone of voice, through our breath patterns, even through our body odor. So you have a small baby, an infant, or a small child who doesn't yet entirely understand the words. That baby is receiving messaging around how safe or unsafe the world is, or even the mother is, just through all those other nonverbal types of communication. So I think this is what happens a lot with my clients, is they can feel very frustrated and quite burnt out, actually. I'm doing all the things. Why is it not working? Why is my baby still so agitated? Why is my baby not sleeping? Why is my toddler constantly throwing tantrums? And again, we never want to blame a mother for situations. That's not helpful. But really being able to ask that question, what part might I as mom be playing in the things that aren't working for me in motherhood that I'm not even aware of? And usually that's going to come back to what's happening on the inside, what's happening in that mom's nervous system. Because again, we can be doing all the right things, but there's a different energy being passed on to our kids.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, it's so true that for me, with energy, I work a lot with energy. So it's very much true that, especially when kids haven't yet developed that mental capacity to understand exactly the words that we're saying, all that they're getting is the energetic, emotional cues. Like,
That's
not
right.
even perhaps at the beginning, it's not even how my face looks or other things. It's literally, there's just from osmosis getting all of that. And as you're saying, there's no point, and it's also not supportive of anyone to blame themselves or to blame a mother for what they are doing. And at the same time, it's important to acknowledge, and it's like, once I'm able to notice, I'm actually quite activated or quite triggered at the moment, I can actually do something with that if I learn how to actually self-regulate, and if I learn how to be able to allow myself to come to a place of more coherence, so then I can show up better for the baby or for anybody else in my life. And I think that there's a very fine line between acknowledging and understanding I have a past, these past experiences, both in my childhood and my adulthood and whatever came before from my family, that all helped shape me. So I need to unlearn a lot of things to be able to understand, okay, this is where I am. How do I want to continue moving forward without blaming myself or without feeling guilt that, I'm not doing everything that I can do? Because again, that's not going to be supportive, but the line is so fine there that a lot of people go into it.
It is a fine line. That's a great way to describe it, actually, because I think we can get stuck when we begin this work, this curious work, right? The really important and curious work around, what was I taught to believe about myself when I was young based on what the adults in my life, how they responded or reacted to me. I mean, that's where we really learn. Our hardwiring is really developed when we're little, and our own mothers and fathers and grandparents and neighbors and society and culture are treating us a certain way, that we learn how to treat ourselves. And many of us were taught during our earliest years, often unintentionally, that there's something wrong with us, that I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm, not okay. And then we walk through life by the way, we really get good at overcompensating in life to prove to the world to the world that we actually are okay or are enough. But that, of course, can be exhausting. And then we have these little babies, and all of that gets projected onto them. I mean, this was my story. I was deeply believed that I was not okay. And I mean, really, I mean, I don't think people knew I was walking through life this way, but a sort of constant dread or fear that something was wrong with me. And then I had my first daughter 18 years ago, and she was beautiful and very, perfect in all the gross, messy unperfect ways that babies are. And yet I was convinced there was something wrong with her. But it was really coming from this belief that there was something wrong with me. And I think that one of the really interesting things about this work, Brian, is that as mothers, we can feel exhausted by how much there is to do. There's that term again, to make sure that our kids are okay. To make sure they have the right teachers and the right, learning environment, and that they're teaching them to sleep and to potty train and all these things to try to make sure our kids are okay, which is exhausting. Really, when we do the personal work to learn how to trust that we are okay, all of the to do the logistics of mothering becomes easier. So it's actually a simpler, more graceful, more easeful way to get to the end result, which is that we just want to believe our kids are okay, and that we want to have those relationships with them where they feel like they're safe with us. It's a much easier, graceful way to get there when we just do the work on the inside, rather than trying to micromanage all the things that are actually not in our control in motherhood, which, by the way, is most things.
Yeah, I think that it's important as well, as you're saying, that the feeling safe bit, because how does the kid feel safe if I'm not feeling safe?
That's right.
That's
right.
That's why, and I'm always I'm always proposing to everyone, we need to do the work so that then we show up for others in the way that we want. We need to do the work. And, I talk to a lot of people that are thinking of becoming parents, and I tell them,
Yep.
This is the moment to do as much inner work as you can, so that then you're able to be a much more conscious parent. Because if you haven't done this, once all of those things, all of those to do, and all of the things that are going to show up with when your babies arrive, then there's more challenges or more obstacles, in a sense, to keep on doing that inner work. It's not that it's not possible. It's just that my way of doing things at other times is, okay, preventative. If I know I'm wanting to go there, what do I need to do to create the conditions necessary to be a more conscious parent? And that means I need to, hopefully, if I can, before becoming a parent, do that. But if you're already a parent, then this is the right time to do the work anyways.
Yeah.
It's with more challenges, perhaps, because you already have the baby, but that's the time.
Yeah, it's never too early or too late. And I think what you're talking about, I mean, I love the whole lens of conscious parenting. And really, even if someone doesn't do a deep dive into that theory, that kind of, what's the word I want to use? The whole community, the writing, the speaking around conscious parenting, really what we're just talking about is mothering or parenting from a place of awareness, right? Where I'm really asking myself, how are my choices and my actions and my thinking patterns impacting my child, so that I can be really intentional in the choices I'm making, whether it comes to my own self-care or parenting and discipline and whatnot. And really what you're talking about is, how do we set the stage for what we call secure attachment? And, the neurobiology underneath secure attachment, that term really just refers to, actually, when anyone thinks about becoming a parent, most people are going to have some ideal version in their head or vision in their head about what they want their relationship with their child to look like? That relationship where the child trusts that they can come to you when they're scared, and you're going to comfort them and reassure them and be able to soothe them. And, there's this kind of strong bond. Like, that's what we all want. From the more clinical perspective, the term is secure attachment. And really what that means is that the parent is secure in themselves, secure enough in themselves to be able to be resilient and steady in the midst of the stress of being with a small human. Small humans are by design chaotic, unpredictable, uncertain, messy. Their nervous systems are all over the map, right? And a securely attached parent has the capacity within themselves to stay steady throughout all that. Mm-hmm. Many of us were not taught how to stay steady and grounded while also feeling hard emotions. And there is no motherhood or parenthood, for that matter, without a lot of really hard feelings: disappointment, sadness, fear, anger, all these things, right? And if we don't know how to tend to ourselves in those moments, we will not be able to be steady and secure for our children. Our children need securely attached parents to grow into securely attached humans, which means they have the capacity to be resilient to stress. They can stay steady even when life outside of them is chaotic. They can think creatively and resource themselves and all these things that we want our children to be able to do. But if we don't set the stage, quite frankly, as early as possible for that, our kids are going to, they just literally will develop all kinds of challenges in their own emotional and psychological and social development. And I say that with a little bit of desire for some healthy anxiety for your listeners, right? Because I want our parents to be anxious enough about the role they're playing in their children's development to think to themselves, okay, how am I actually doing? And what do I need to do to take as good of care of myself as possible from the inside out, so that I can be resilient to all the stresses in parenting? And I think many of us just come into parenting thinking that we're going to be able to master it the way we've mastered our careers or our organization of our home or our babysitting when we were a kid or whatever it is. And of course, those skills of problem solving and controlling and organizing are really useful, but those skills will not cut it when it comes to the more chaotic moments in mothering and in parenting in general.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think that it's so important as we keep on talking that inner work, because again, as you're saying, children, they see or feel how the parents are. So if we are not in that space of being confident, secure, allowing, flowing with things, because again, things are going to be a lot of times chaotic, then that's going to be what they take on. And I work a lot with different methodologies for understanding, like ancestral trauma or family dynamics. And I keep on working with so many people that, as you're saying, all of this gets passed down through the generations. And it's very simple a lot of times to see, like, oh, this happened, now this will happen. It's kind of like 1 + 1. It's true. It's not like, it's really hard for something to be not a true if it was 1 + 1.
That's right.
And to understand a lot of that which we're carrying, and as you were saying before, like if you grow up without any fault to the parent, with an understanding, I'm not good enough because that's how I felt based on my interaction, whether that was meant or not, because usually it's not. Yeah. I'm going to take that into my adulthood, and then that's how I'm going to show up for my kids. And I think that the more that we're able to release some of this and to unlearn and to create new pathways for understanding a different way, then that's how we create the conditions necessary for the growth of a person that is actually able to navigate the challenges and the ups and downs of life so much different. I know this has been my experience when I started to learn all of this, and then suddenly I'm like, oh, all of these things that are happening, and I'm not actually impacted by them. My mom once had to actually tell me because I was still in my early 20s, and I went to give a workshop to this business, and it was all, like middle-aged men with suits, and I'm there, like a 20-something-year-old, and they're like, why should we listen to you? And I was like, so I had stuff to share with them, but then I asked my mom, like, I haven't been through that many hardships, in life and things like that. And she started listing things, and she was like, well, you've just been able to navigate them much easier than
Yes.
most people have. And it's, because I've been doing this work for myself.
Yes.
And this is the thing that getting there. And I love what you are saying as well about the chaotic and staying like secure, because
Yes.
I last year I went to visit my family, and I was on the plane, and there was this woman with a baby, and the baby started crying, and I could sense how she started to feel so guilty. And I went to her and
Yep.
I'm like, it's a baby. Babies cry. Like, just breathe, be with it. It doesn't matter if other people are annoyed. Babies are going to cry. And then
Yes.
in another plane, I got there, and this woman had pieces of paper that she went to all of us that we were around. And it said, I have a baby. Most likely it's going to cry. I'm sorry. There's nothing that I can do if it's going to cry. I'm going to do my best. Like, use your
Oh,
headphones and listen to something.
I love that so much. I had a client once that anytime she went on a plane, she brought with her uh, earplugs. Is that what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever. What are they called?
Yeah, earplugs.
Earplugs?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
earplugs and a bag, little plastic Ziploc bag. They had earplugs and chocolate kisses in them. And she gave them to all the people sitting around her in the airplane from the same thing. It's sort of its acknowledgement of there's only so much I have control over, right? I can control the environment. I can control my own nervous system so I don't start freaking out with my baby, because then you have both a little human and a big human sitting next to you freaking out, which is just going to double the trouble. And all I can do is stay calm, and the rest is outside of my control. And I think many of us, again, especially the high achieving, high performing woman, somewhere in their beliefs that her job is to make sure everybody else is okay all the time. And so there's all that emphasis on trying to micromanage the environment. And then the energy gets expelled outwards where she has no control. And then she has no energy left to tend to herself and her own nervous system. And I think something else that's really interesting, you alluded to it a few minutes ago, which is that in any state of real or perceived threat, our brain is wired to all or nothing rigid thinking. It's just where we will go, either or, right? Our brain is wired for that. That type of thinking creates so much anxiety and guilt in motherhood. By design, I think most of us enter motherhood and parenthood with a tendency towards our brain's going to go to this all or nothing thinking, because it's actually quite terrifying to believe that you're responsible for this little human. The question is, and certainly the high achievers who tend to be in all or nothing thinkers anyway, but the question is, what does it look like to be willing? That's a really tricky word, but it's an important one, to be willing to unhook from right, wrong, good, bad, either or. Because most of the time, the answer is going to lie somewhere in the middle, in the both and. So your example of this woman on the airplane, and my example is a great example of someone who's saying, I'm going to take personal responsibility for my 100%. Like, what's mine? What is mine to take 100% responsibility for? But I'm not going to take 101%, because that's yours. And I'm not going to take 99% because that's putting my stuff onto you. I'm just going to take my 100%. And then I'm going to trust that all the other grownups on this airplane can manage themselves. And there's something that both and to me is my nervous system loves that. It feels like a relief to just recognize I'm just responsible for what I'm doing for myself in this moment. And when it comes to the mom baby dyad, I mean, a mom and her baby's nervous systems are interconnected until age 3, when a child's brain begins to develop the capacity to begin to learn how to kind of be a separate human, which is what the terrible twos and terrible threes are, right? But our nervous system is tied to our kid's nervous system. So if we are wanting our kid to sleep or to not cry in an airplane or whatever that thing is, the quickest way to do that is to tend to ourselves.
Yeah, and as you say, I think that a lot of times, and partly this comes from each of us and our society. Most of us, we don't know how to do this. I know when
That's
I was a
right.
child, I didn't learn how to, self-soothe. I didn't learn how to self-regulate. I didn't learn how to actually navigate challenges and how to come back to a place of coherence. I learned that throughout time because I was interested in that, and that has been my path. But a lot of times, the people around me are not that, and then I'm fortunate that I don't have the style or the way of people pleasing that many people have, which this is huge, especially for women, to be able to understand, it's not my responsibility. Like them, it's not my responsibility. I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to do as much as possible to make sure that the environment and everyone, is okay, whatever it is that I am. But there's things that are out of my control, as you're saying, and that includes everyone else. So, if we as a society we have major mental health crisis,
Yes, we do.
like for some people it's quite acute, and for a lot of people it doesn't seem quite acute, but still most of us are going through challenges. Then we need to understand, okay, this is my reality at the moment, and I love what you're saying. What's the 100% that I can take responsibility on, and the rest is like, kind of like allowing that to be, just to be let go, because that's what we need to do. We need to let go of the things that are outside of our control and the things that are someone else's. And the more that I take responsibility for my bit, then the easier that I can show up for others, especially as you're saying, for the baby, because there's so much connection there. I still feel a lot of times, like with my mom, like I'm she's on the other side of the world, and I still feel that, like that never goes away.
I think one of the really tricky parts of this, I'm actually curious to know what you think of this given your work, but what I find in my clients who are all mothers of young kids, most of whom have sort of that type A, high achiever, people pleasing mentality. Most of us come into motherhood, and what we bring with us are these really deep, hardwired, again, back to what we were talking about earlier, beliefs about who we need to be in this world in order to feel safe, in order to receive what we need most, which is to feel seen, heard, and understood, in a sense of belonging and all of that stuff. And so the concepts can make sense, right? Put your oxygen mask on first, mom, before you put it on your child. I mean, we can understand the concept. We can understand the concept of I can't control anyone else's choices and feelings and behaviors intellectually, but our nervous system doesn't buy it because of our old hardwiring. I think that's a really interesting place to focus. And the work I do with moms who are struggling with anxiety, emotional overwhelm and guilt and burnout and motherhood always starts there. Because anything we talk about following that, any coaching I give about how to help your brain be more resilient to stress, or how to become a quote unquote secure parent, or how to parent through tricky situations. Until we address that deep limiting belief that's motivating the thoughts and the feelings and the actions and the ultimate results, nothing's going to stick.
Yeah,
D-
yeah.
you know what I mean by that?
Definitely. And this is a lot of times my approach. My
Yes.
approach is, first we need to unlearn, we need to heal, we need to process, whether that's through, for some people that's going to be through somatic practices and, working with the body. For some people it's going to be more guided meditation, mindfulness practices. For some people it's going to be some energy work. It doesn't matter, because we're all different. The how we get there, it's about understanding. The first thing to do is unlearning, so that then we actually have that capacity to then create the new neural pathways and the new ways that then through that we're going to be able to engage in all of the, as you're saying, the to-dos and all of the how-tos. Because if we are not dealing with that, there's no point really on all of the other stuff. And that's always my starting point is, okay, this is where we are. We need to take responsibility of where we are, and we need to take responsibility that it's not that what I'm carrying up until this moment has been my choice, perhaps, or it's, blaming myself. It's I have done the best that I could based on whatever it is that has happened until this moment. And now I can take responsibility for where I am now and how do I unlearn, how do I heal, how do I change my beliefs, how do I shift my energy, and how do I understand how to self-regulate so that my nervous system is not activating, as you're saying, going to that, all or nothing. And I'm able to allow more flow into my life, more openness that then allows more curiosity, more creativity, that allows myself to show up with more presence into whatever it is that I'm doing.
And we so much of the time, this is also why, I'm not going to say impossible for everybody, although I think it's very unlikely, but it's almost impossible to do this work on our own because we can only see what we can see. We don't know where our blind spots lie. And I think that there's something so interesting about, you think about all of the cultural beliefs. It's like built into our society. Again, it's just how we started about what it means to be a good mom or a bad mom, good parent or bad parent. So many of these things set us up, like we sacrifice ourselves. Good motherhood is about self-sacrifice. If I ask a person, a woman who I'm working with, I will often say, how do you feel right now? And they will often, they'll say anxious, guilty, exhausted, rage. There's a lot of anger and undercurrent of rage and a lot of moms that come into my coaching program. So I'll talk about those things, exhausted, and then I'll say, how do you want to feel? And they'll say free, peaceful, calm, connected. Of course, even my voice changes as I say the second version of words from the first version of words. And then I'll say, tell me what you think it means to be a good mom. And they'll say, well, I'm, sacrificing myself and I'm meeting all of my child's needs all the time. And I'm, putting my child ahead of myself. All these beliefs about what's required to do mothering well doesn't allow for those feelings. It just literally does not allow for those feelings. And so we need to begin again to open up this rigid thinking to really ask ourselves with so much compassion, okay, if I'm feeling exhausted and anxious and guilty and angry, what part am I playing in that? It's easy to say I feel that way because my kid isn't sleeping or my toddler's throwing tantrums or my partner doesn't listen or work is so demanding. But more often than not, it's this belief system that we're bringing to the table in early motherhood that then, confirmation bias, we're only looking for evidence to prove that that's true. And we're hyper focused on those things that we least want to be experiencing. And then we give ourselves no room for accessing those feelings. And it's really interesting to watch from, perspective, the perspective you and I have when it's our client. And then as a mother of two teenage daughters, getting your child to age 18 without losing your shit a lot of the time is pretty impossible, right? Because internally it's so chaotic having a toddler and a school-age child and a teenager, and the magic, true magic that happens when in those moments when I am feeling so out of control, I'm not able to control their thoughts or behaviors or feelings, everything's hectic, everything's unpredictable. If I can come inside and take, 3 deep grounding breaths or feel the bottom of my foot on the floor, simple things, suddenly I can settle my nervous system. And then all those things that I've been telling myself are problems suddenly don't have to be problems anymore. And that nothing has changed for my teenager or my toddler or my baby. They're still crying or still angry about something, or my husband still maybe not responding to me the way I want him to. But suddenly I feel so much more grounded on the inside that I don't, quote unquote, have to scream and yell to make someone else change.
Mm.
It's a very different way of looking at this pattern in all relationships. But again, in mother and child relationships, we can have more of an influence, more of a quote unquote positive influence when we address these situations from a grounded place. I think I just went all over the place. I don't
No,
even know
it's
where I
good.
started with that, but
It's good, and I think it's the interesting thing a lot of times of how in our society we are outward orientated instead of inner
yes, that's right.
orientated, and it's a lot of times about, for me, it's about a lot of times understanding what's my under my responsibility at this moment, like what's under my domain, what can I actually take responsibility on at this moment. As you're saying, they can be doing this, that can be happening there. Okay, I'm not going to be able to change that. I can change my inner state. I can show up differently based on my understanding on this moment of what can I do. And it's not that, for me, and understanding a lot of times, we are co-creating our lives. Of
That's
course,
right.
the outside influences, and we can influence some of the outside. But that comes from within. That comes from a moment of understanding. That comes from awareness. And that comes from being present to understand, like, oh, okay. Instead of screaming, I'm going to take a few deep breaths because I have already practiced this. If I haven't practiced this, if I haven't worked with anyone to show me this or to give me the space to do that, then I'm not going to be able to do that in the moment. But once I do that in the moment, I can actually show up and take a few deep breaths and be like, okay, what's more supportive in this situation? And then doing that, because we have so much inner wisdom, and this, I'm sure that this is
Yes.
part of your work, is going beyond how we have internalized all of the cultural understandings of how it means to be, in this case, a mom. Then it's what's my intuition, what it's the right thing for my child based on my own understanding. And I think that to get to that, we need to have, as you were saying before, come back to a place that we feel secure, that we feel well, that we feel balanced, that we feel more aligned, to them being like, oh, this is the right thing at this moment. Might not be
I
perfect, might not be, like later on. In this moment, this is what I feel is the right thing to do.
I could not have said it better. I mean, I agree so wholeheartedly with what you're saying. And I think, again, in motherhood, one of the things that happens is that we look outwards. We watch everyone else and ask and see what they're doing and compare ourselves, or we read the books, or we even ask the quote unquote experts. We disregard context when we do that. Every moment has context to it. And I believe so deeply that each woman, each human, each woman who gives birth and becomes a parent or adopts a child for that matter, in the moment when she can slow everything down, will know exactly what needs to happen. That wisdom is so there. We talk ourselves out of it, or we're told by other people that we should do it their way and not our way. But the truth is that when we slow down, when we quiet the noise, when we feel our feet on the floor, when we slow our breathing down, that intuition, I think that we confuse instinct and intuition sometimes. Intuition is quiet, and we need to be patient. We need to slow down to find it. It is there for every single woman I've ever worked with, and that is thousands of women over the 20 plus years, even those who tell themselves they don't have it. It's right
Mm.
there.
Yeah. And, I was actually recently running a workshop around the feminine energy, healing the feminine energy,
Mm,
actually healing the masculine energy, and a lot of the beliefs that have come through
sure.
time. And there's so much that we need to unlearn to be able to go into that space, that stillness, that's where we can tap into our own wisdom. And as you're saying, we all have that. We just, most of us don't know how to access it because we haven't been shown how to do that. And the more that we're able to show someone how to do that, the easier it's going to be. And this is, again, as you're saying, this is why a lot of times we need someone else to show us that we already have the resources necessary to do these things. It's not that I need to, as you're saying, go to an expert and it's like, save me. It's, we go to an expert so that then they can show us we already have what we need in any given situation. And I think that that for me is one of the most powerful things that we can do for our clients is get them to realize they have the answers, they have the capacity to do that, and they don't really need us beyond the scope of the process that we are working on.
I think that's beautiful. I love the metaphor of the sculptor that comes up to a block of stone and the head is already in the stone.
Yeah.
There's something about that visual that just like almost brings me to tears every time I think about it, because that's really what you're talking about. All we're doing with our clients is giving them the tools so that they can chip away the stuff and find their own, beautiful sculpture inside the block of stone. When I think about it in the work I do with mothers, it's so profound. I mean, of course, I've had my own therapists and coaches to get here. None of us can do this alone. I mean, I really cannot stress that enough. All of us need guides and mentors and support people. But when I can help my client, who's a mother, understand that her wisdom already is there, she then has the capacity to parent her child from that place so that she can teach her child when her child is very young that the wisdom is already there. And if she doesn't know how to do that for herself, she's not going to be able to do that for her child. And it's beautiful to watch people come in who have, like you're saying, generational patterns, like generations of attachment trauma and emotion dysregulation and all kinds of things, learn to trust themselves, to know that they can find their own answers, and then to mother from that place and recognize that they're changing those generational patterns. It is really mind-blowing when you step away from it and see the power of that. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, and it's the ripple effect. That's me
right.
A lot of times. That's the focus is I work on myself. That has a ripple effect. You work on yourself, you have a ripple effect, and it's beautiful. And Kate, I'm just aware of our time.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would love if there's one last thing that you'd like to share with everyone that is watching or listening. Perhaps something that you already shared, or something different, like a takeaway, especially if they are potentially struggling and they are mothers and they don't know what to do. Is there something else that you would like to share?
Yeah, I would love people to remember, or maybe to hear for the first time, that the emotions and the feelings are never the problem. Many of us are raised in families where we were taught that if we feel emotional discomfort, that means that there's something wrong with the world or with us. And again, I guess I said this earlier, but there is no motherhood without loads of emotional discomfort, both for ourselves and for our babies and our children. And the emotion is never the problem. It always makes sense. But when we learn how to tend to that emotion on the inside with self-compassion, how to find the both and of, I can both feel angry and still trust that I'm okay at the same time. I can both feel fear and still trust that in this moment, nothing bad is happening. When we learn how to regulate from the inside, not only can we move through our emotions faster, but we can stay steady with our children's emotions, which is, again, the foundation of secure attachment. And it's, I really think many of us hold fear-based beliefs about feelings in and of themselves and think that when our child is feeling distress, our job is to fix it so they no longer feel distress. And it's just exhausting to parent that way. And so, yeah, I think that is just one little takeaway I would love to end with.
Beautiful. And Kate, for everyone that potentially is resonating with you or would love to know more or how to work with you, where can they find you? How can they work with you?
Thank you. So I will send a link for the show notes to a 30-minute masterclass I have that really talks more about what we've talked about today, Brian, but really digs deeper into how our deeper beliefs that we come into motherhood with can lead very quickly to results that we don't want. And so it's about 30 minutes. It just explains the neuroscience behind that. There is a link to book a call if people have any questions in that. I have my own podcast called Motherhood Uncut, which I would love any mothers out there if they're looking. I really believe that no one should be mothering alone. And so many of us feel alone in this journey. And the whole premise of Motherhood Uncut is to be mothering within a community of people that are all listening to the same things and caring about the same things. That's Motherhood Uncut. And then I'm very active on Instagram at Kate Kripke, and I welcome any questions and come hang out with me there. I love meeting people on the back end of Instagram.
Awesome. So I'll have all of that on the show notes for everyone if you're interested. And as always, for everyone listening, what did you hear? What did you learn? Was there something interesting? How is your experience? Perhaps if you're a mother, how has your experience been? Just leave us a comment anywhere that you're finding this episode. Thank you so much, Kate, for taking the time for this conversation with me. And yeah, hopefully there's more in the future.
I love this conversation. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for listening, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.